Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for a special presentation from Congresswoman Doris Matsui.
Hello again. I'm Dr. Kevin Smothers, Chief Medical Executive for Sutter Medical Center, Sacramento. It's my pleasure to be here today to introduce someone who has been an instrumental leader in this community for decades, Congresswoman Doris Matsui. One of the many reasons we participate in Cap to Cap each year is to advocate for positive change in the Sacramento region. We are grateful that even once when we're back home, Congresswoman Matsui continues to do this on our behalf, day in and day out, through her work representing District 6 in Washington, D.C. She's been a steadfast supporter of Cap to Cap for many years and a strong partner for our business community, supporting the diverse industries that make up our region. During her time in Congress, she's improved Sacramento's flood protection measures and promoted a clean energy economy, serving as the senior member of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. Congresswoman Matsui's work to increase public transportation options in Sacramento, including extending our light rail system to link West Sacramento, is just one of the many ways she's helped to create a vibrant region where families can live, work, and play. For us in healthcare, we are grateful to Congresswoman Matsui for helping to ensure quality, affordable healthcare for all. She's been a mental health champion and most recently a leader on a rapidly growing issue of telehealth. We are lucky to have her representing us as a member of Congress and thankful that she's taking the time to be with us today. Please join me virtually welcoming Congresswoman Doris Matsui today.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to join you today and welcome back Cap to Cap. First of all, I want to give a huge thank you to the entire Metro Chamber team for making this virtual program possible. After the past year and a half, it is wonderful to be able to join together once again in this yearly tradition. We have already had some productive discussions this week, and I thank you for staying engaged on the issues that matter most to the Sacramento region. It's certainly a busy time in Washington, which is why it is so important for you to be here. There have been a lot of headlines the past few weeks about infrastructure negotiations, and that work is still ongoing. But right now, we also stand an exciting time for Sacramento and the future of our region. The approach we're taking in Sacramento on everything from sustainable transportation systems to the delivery of healthcare to economic development and innovation can and should be a model for the rest of the country. Here in Congress, I often reference our region when in discussions about shaping policy decisions. As we come out of an unprecedented year and a half, it is those of you here who are laying the foundation for a more prosperous future, a foundation that is based on both the economic realities of our region and valuable strategic thinking. Sometimes it can be difficult to sift through the amount of information in the news and online, but I'm here to tell you that I'm proud of the positive direction we're headed in several of my areas of focus. The hot topic on everyone's mind right now is infrastructure. Bringing home federal dollars for things like flood protection and transportation has always been a priority of mine. And as we think about the next steps, pushing for strong federal investments will continue to be a priority. Between the House-passed Invest Act, the President's budget, and bipartisan infrastructure framework, there is more than $190 million in potential funding that could be headed straight into our region. Money for projects like our new I Street Bridge, our flood protection projects, and renewable energy improvements are regional priorities I fought to include in these bills. While we still have work to do, I'm looking forward to continue our shared efforts to secure this funding. Yet, infrastructure stretches well beyond the concrete of our roads and bridges. Right now, we are looking at innovative ways to tackle the challenges of the 21st century, getting broadband infrastructure deployed across the nation, and opening up opportunities for Americans to access next-generation 5G networks. As we move out of the pandemic, I'm continuing to push for the advancement of telehealth, advocating for the needs of our families, seniors, and caregivers, and working with many of you to strengthen our world-class local healthcare networks. Sacramento has so much to be proud of, and our priorities continue to show why we are a hub for the region. We maintain a connected and invested city, not only because of our innovative attitude, but because we recognize the importance of a thriving creative economy. When we rose to the challenge of responding to the COVID crisis, I'm proud that we were united in support for our museums and creative spaces through the Shuttered Venues Operators Grant Program and made sure our arts communities weren't left behind. It is my great honor to represent a community that prioritizes the power of art and culture to enrich our lives, strengthen our community, and grow our economy. That's why I'm so pleased that Secretary Lonnie Bunch is our special guest today. Throughout his long and inspiring career, Lonnie Bunch has been a tireless warrior for the arts and a moral compass for one of our greatest institutions, the Smithsonian. He has a rare gift of so acutely tying our past to our present. He's been a strong advocate for a creative economy, and he is an important voice in support of our cultural institutions. For years, I've had the privilege to work with Secretary Bunch, first when he was director of the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and now in his current role as our leader and secretary. I think the greatest homage to his vision is the wonderful Museum of African American History and Culture, which Lonnie took from a bold vision to a national treasure. Anyone who has visited the museum has left knowing our painful history, but more importantly, has left reaffirmed with an enduring hope and resilience, the story of the American people. As a leader of the entire Smithsonian, he has continued this work. He fosters innovation in artistic platforms, and he's pushed our most storied cultural institution to new heights. That is the kind of person Lonnie is. He is firmly grounded in the truth of history and exudes hope and understanding to those who had the privilege of knowing him. And although most people know him as an accomplished historian and cultural leader across the nation, I'm proud to say that he is my friend. With that, please welcome the wonderful Secretary, Lonnie Bunch.
Thank you, Congresswoman Matsui. It's my great pleasure to be part of the Metro Chamber's annual Capital to Capital program that has helped the people of Sacramento get involved in the democratic process and have a voice in D.C. since 1970. Today, I'd like to talk about what museums mean to our communities and how much the arts and humanities mean to society, especially in this difficult time. And given the two capitals we're talking about, I'd like to focus on the impressive museum presence in Sacramento and in Washington, D.C. Representative Matsui has served on the boards of many cultural institutions. She's a member of the Smithsonian's Boards of Regents, and I found out was a volunteer docent at the Crocker Art Museum in Sacramento for many years. So I can testify how important museums are to her. There are more than 25 museums in the Sacramento area alone, and the nation's capital is home to the Smithsonian's constellation of free museums and many other wonderful cultural institutions. Museums are vital to the communities in which they reside. They are invaluable sources of the arts and humanities. They reveal our shared commonalities. As Ken Burns has once said, the humanities help us understand almost everything better. It is in fact the glue that allows us to understand precisely how things work and how to get things done. I completely agree. Museums are some of the greatest resources for the knowledge that educates, innovates, and inspires. Unfortunately, cultural institutions have faced numerous challenges, from climate change that threatens collections to gaps in funding. And that was before COVID-19. When the pandemic shut everything down, museums were especially hit hard. 90% of the museums around the world have had to close, and up to 13% of them could be permanently unable to reopen. UNESCO estimates that revenues on the average have fallen 80% at cultural institutions since 2019. So the question is, what can institutions like the Smithsonian, that provide so much to the world, do to survive and thrive? In many ways, museums have already emphatically made the case for the terrific value they provide. So many creative museum professionals have taken this moment as an opportunity to help their institutions evolve and to be more involved in their communities than ever before. That has manifested in a number of ways. First, despite the challenges presented by the pandemic, they have worked diligently to continue doing what they do best. Even when their buildings were closed, even when employees could not come to work, they figured ways how to bring their programming, exhibitions, and education to the people. We know that objects will continue to underpin museums' educational programming, scholarship, science, and exhibitions. But the reality is that millions of people don't have the chance to visit museums in person, either due to travel, financial constraints. Yet, given the prevalence of laptops and cell phones, most students can visit at the click of a mouse. As the secretary of the Smithsonian, I've been impressed by how the dedicated staffs of our museums, libraries, and education centers have continued serving the public during the pandemic. They've been able to pivot, to use technology to reach audiences in creative new ways. For example, the Smithsonian's Open Access Collection consists of more than 3 million free digital items from the Smithsonian's collections. In the past 3 months, these assets have been viewed by more than 25 million times and downloaded nearly 800,000 times. The Cooper Hewitt, which is the Smithsonian Design Museum in New York City, has used these free resources to inspire creativity and collaboration. Recently, they funded a handful of prototypes for digital platforms based on the open access collections. Examples included a web-based virtual reality portal that lets audience navigate a museum only through sound, and an educational video game that asks players to work collaboratively to discover, to collect, and authenticate artifacts. Another museum using the internet to great success is the Sacramental History Center, a traditional museum focusing on the history of the gold rush in California's capital that is anything but traditional when it comes to using social media. As of September, they have nearly 2 million TikTok followers worldwide, more than any other museum in the world. And its posts have been liked more than 23 million times. It's an example how cultural institutions can benefit from trying new and unexpected things. But of course, not everybody has equal access to computers and to technology, especially in traditionally underserved communities. That's why I would argue it's crucially important to create educational programs that doesn't rely on a laptop or an iPhone. During the pandemic, educators from across the Smithsonian began collaborating with USA Today. They're producing a series of low-tech educational materials based on our collections and our activities. Since June of 2020, we have distributed almost 600,000 print activity guides for children and 3.7 million printed newspaper inserts for intergenerational learning. Another way cultural institutions are serving our communities is by going beyond our normal mission parameters to directly help people. For example, during the height of the pandemic, museums like the Chicago History Museum donated masks, gloves, and other PPE to medical workers, including my daughter, who's an emergency room doctor in Chicago. Colorado museums work with the Colorado Department of Higher Education to collect donated laptops for students who need them for remote learning. And the Smithsonian's Anacostia Museum has been working with Feed the Fridge, a program that brings stocked refrigerators into areas with high levels of food insecurity for anyone to use free of charge. Since January, the Anacostia Fridge has provided over 500 free meals a week. It's also important that museums recognize the emotional and psychological toll this pandemic has taken on the nation. Many are using this time to document what people are going through so they can help people in future generations understand this moment. For example, the California Historical Society has reached out to their visitors to answer questions about the coronavirus and to send pictures that represent their experiences. Our Anacostia Community Museum has also curated people's oral histories during the pandemic. And I would argue that we're not just facing one pandemic that weighs on our collective psyche, we're also facing a pandemic of racism and social strife. That's why I've asked the Smithsonian to deploy rapid response teams, not just to acquire materials related to the first known doses of COVID vaccine, but also to collect items from the George Floyd protest and objects from the insurrection at the Capitol building in January. I have been so impressed by the way cultural institutions have used this moment to try to bridge our racial and cultural differences by being places that seek to foster understanding and conversations about race, gender, and identity. One terrific example of how it can do this is found in the Crocker Art Museum. Its current Legends from Los Angeles exhibition is a brilliant exploration of African American life and a powerful refutation of gender and racial stereotypes, seen through the lens of gifted artists Betty Saar and her two daughters, Leslie and Allison Saar. At the Smithsonian, our Asian Pacific American Center collected more than 260 different resources for teachers and the public to address stereotypes and bias faced by the AAPI community. And one of the most exciting Smithsonian-wide initiatives is Our Shared Future, Reckoning with Our Racial Past. With it, we hope to inspire a national dialogue about race and racism, one of the nation's most difficult and enduring challenges. By centering diversity, equity, and accessibility and inclusiveness in programs, exhibitions, and educational content, and staffing is doing the right thing. It is also by doing the smart thing, by responding to changing societal norms, by embracing a wider audience, museums can better serve our communities. In terms, our community will see us as partners invested in making positive change for them. So what can we glean from the way museums have adapted to COVID? And what will it mean for our long-term outlook? When museums closed, online resources became the default mode of contact. People responded by showing they were comfortable receiving museum content digitally instead of physically. We also know that even as cultural institutions have opened back to the public, even with safety protocols in place, a significant percentage of visitors will be reluctant to return in person. At the Smithsonian, our visitorship is about 65% of what it once was before the pandemic. It is clear that museums need to find a way to be less reliant on physical spaces and also more reliant on technology that expands their reach. We have to find the right tension between tradition and innovation. I also believe successful museums in the years ahead will have an entrepreneurial spirit, taking chances, offering different views and learning experiences. For museums to thrive, we need to be more than repositories of historical information or artifacts. We also need to become engaged on contemporary issues that matter to people by leading honest, constructive dialogues, because people trust us. Museums don't need to be activist organizations, but we must address contemporary issues that are important to the audiences we serve. And cultural institutions looking to remain relevant must creatively engage people who have been historically overlooked. It is no longer enough to rely on the old ways of doing things. Museums can and must do more to embrace a new, diverse, multi-generational audience. We can uphold museums' traditions while expanding our missions. We can strengthen our outreach, and we can use our museums' beauty, scholarship, and education to help our citizens, to help our communities, to help our countries. These dual pandemics have been incredibly hard in so many ways. So many of us, me personally, has lost people during the past year. But what I haven't lost is my optimism that brighter days are ahead. Cultural institutions have an opportunity to reflect on this moment and reevaluate how we operate, and what we stand for. We can reimagine what's possible. We can reconnect with audiences in new ways. We can reinvigorate our offerings, and we can revitalize ourselves in our service to the country. Ultimately, we need to be of value. And by being of value means building on our traditions and accepting new ways of doing things. Thank you.